Alrighty, so I have found myself fallen down a little bit of a rabbit hole since my last stream. YouTube had started recommending me these police activity videos, these like body cam footage YouTube channels that were all centered around like covering and sort of like narrating over police body cam footage. Whether it be like a story where the police are arguably in the right in arresting somebody and they go about it like the correct way and the person they're arresting is like the worst ever person and you're just kind of like you're low-key rooting for the cops despite not generally liking cops just because that particular person is just so awful, or they did something so heinous. But most of this channel's videos are not like police body cam footage made to make the police look good. This channel's called Audit the Audit, and most of its videos are about stories in which the cops are not the good guys. This is not a propaganda channel. This is a channel whose most of its content is centered around talking about stories that cops would generally rather you not talk about. Some of the most horrendous acts of police misconduct like that have ever made the news and have ever like been big in the headlines are covered by this channel. And I've been literally binge watching these videos. They're quite addictive, I must admit. And I figured that it would be nice to check one of them out on stream with you guys, since, I mean, you guys love when I do any, type of ACAB segment, and I haven't done one in a long time, so I feel you guys are pretty much owed it at this point, So let's check this out. This video is called Police Raid the Wrong House and Refuse to Leave. They did a SWAT raid on the wrong house and refused to leave. I've not seen this one yet. This is one I've not seen. The title and thumbnail just grabbed my attention, and I thought we'd watch it together because every one of these videos I've seen is good, and they've all... When I watch these off stream, they're videos that I'm like, God, I wish I was watching this on stream right now. I have so much to say. So I figured, you know what? Let's watch it on stream because I've got a lot to say.
Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers voluntariness, consent searches, and anonymous tips, and is brought to us by Lance Thornton's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. Before we dive into the interaction, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of this episode, Babbel. Spring is here, and now is the time to step out of your hibernation den and get ready.
All right, we're watching their video. We're reacting to their videos, so we'll let their sponsor play.
Travel. Immersing yourself in an unfamiliar culture is one of the most rewarding and enlightening experiences that you can have. And knowing another language opens the door to so many opportunities for personal growth and development. Learning a new language has helped me connect with creators and brands from all over the world and establish new relationships that I wouldn't have been able to make without Babbel's easily digestible lessons. Babbel's award-winning technology is scientifically proven to help you start learning a new language in as little as 3 weeks, utilizing short 10-minute interactive lessons developed by real language teachers, not learning algorithms or AI. Thanks to Babbel's speech recognition feature, learning French has been très facile, and I'm learning new, fun, and practical.
I feel like I should try to learn or like brush up on Spanish probably because I know quite a bit of Spanish. I should probably try to like refine that as much as possible while I'm still relatively young, and it's easier to learn languages because the older you get, the harder it is to learn new languages. If you can learn shit tons of languages as a little kid, that's the easiest time that you can learn languages because you're learning to talk just generally.
Phrases every day. Right now, Babbel is offering members of the ATA community a 60% discount when you click on the link in the description. With a 20-day money-back guarantee, you have absolutely nothing to lose.
Duolingo is punching the air right now.
True. Start your language learning journey today. Thanks again to Babbel for sponsoring this episode. On the morning of March 12th, 2023, officers from the Erie Police Department SWAT team, Pennsylvania State Police Fugitive Task Force, and U.S. Marshals arrived at the Erie, Pennsylvania home of 52-year-old Lance Thornton, who suffers from early onset dementia. Mr. Thornton's doorbell camera captured footage of the officers removing it from its installation location and throwing it into Mr. Thornton's yard, after which the officers knocked on.
They straight up removed his fucking doorbell camera so that the raid wouldn't be caught on video. Holy shit.
The door when Mr. Thornton, who was sleeping at the time,
Although that would presumably also, although to be fair, I know from experience those doorbells let you have a live feed of what's going on outside your house, like outside your door. So if you do think there's crime happening if you've had like a call done to your, like to a house and you think there's something going down there legitimately, it's not necessarily the most unreasonable thing ever to like take the camera that lets the owner of the house that's inside potentially see everything going on outside. Like it's somewhat reasonable, but the fact that it was the wrong house and no doubt what's going to happen soon means like, ugh.
Did not get to the door quickly enough. They started to break down the door. Mr. Thornton came to the door before they broke it down completely, and the officers asked him to step outside after explaining that he suffered from dementia.
The thing about America is, if, like, you start hearing smashing up against your door, you don't know if it's, like, a crazy drug addict who's, like, trying to get in to, like, kill you and take everything you own for drug money, or if it's the police, like, doing, a raid, like a no-knock raid or something, and they've been called to the wrong house. That's the scariest thing. You don't even need to be, like, a big YouTuber who gets swatted or something to experience a swatting. All it takes is a small mistake, and it's happened many times before, and the SWAT team, which is getting called out to a real thing happening, comes to the wrong house and goes in. They go in guns blazing, for lack of a better phrase, and people get hurt. Sometimes people die. And it could happen to you. Like, literally, you could do nothing wrong your entire life, and one morning you might wake up to the police kicking down your door because they came to the wrong house. And if you aren't able to process fast enough what's happening and immediately understand what you need to do to survive that situation, there is a good chance it will be the death of you. And you better not count on the police having any consequences for killing you and making that mistake.
Mr. Thornton took out his cell phone and began to film the encounter.
We're not here for you.
Then I'm being told to put my phone down. I was told I had a right to pull it. That is my rental car. What is going?
You absolutely have the right to film the police. You absolutely have the right to film the police, and if they tell you that you don't, they're lying to you, and you should immediately recognize that you're dealing with a... I know all cops are bad, but you're dealing with a cop that doesn't give a fuck about the rules or the law, who really just wants to get you in handcuffs and in a cell, probably to meet a quota or because he just doesn't like the way you looked at him. Yeah, like it's bad. It's not good. Like, record the cops.
You're not allowed inside. I want to know what's going on. Then you tell me right now. No,
if a cop attacks you to get the phone out of your hand because you're recording them, then you're in the right.
No.
Keep recording as long as you can, and do not fight them, do not hit them, do not assault them.
No, there's nobody in my house.
If they attack you, do not defend yourself in any way.
All right,
if the cop attacks you.
To make sure he's not in there.
No, I swear to you.
They'll kill you. Like, if you try to defend yourself against a cop, you're just going to end up dead anyway, and the cop's going to have full legal justification for killing you. It's as simple as that. If you try to defend yourself against a cop, physically, they're just going to kill you successfully. You're not going to win. You're going to die. They're going to kill you. And they're going to be legally in the right. So, yeah.
No, I don't know him. I do not like your attitude and the way you came across. Because I said, I'm going to pull my phone out of my pocket, and they said yes. When I said I'm going to start recording, you told me to turn it off.
We have our broadcast on. We're recording right now.
I'm going to get every one of these because I do not know what's going on here.
Listen, this guy's wanted for attempted homicide, 3 officers. Okay, a tip came in that this guy is staying at your house. Understand? Over the weekend.
Who are you guys with?
U.S. Marshals, EPD SWAT.
What's
PSP,
EPD?
Police.
Okay, keep going.
And PSP.
What's PSP?
Pennsylvania State Police.
Okay, I'm shaking right now. Right now, if this is true, what you're telling me,
yes,
I give you full permission, full run of my house.
Do you know this guy?
Sir, I already answered that question, asked and answered.
But here's the thing, there's a reason why this tip was called into the marshals. There's a connection between you and this guy. Now, it might not be directly. Okay, do you have a girlfriend?
Just hear him out. Just hear him
My
out.
wife is an ER doctor.
Who's your wife? Is there another girl, woman that stays here? A girl?
No.
Nobody else?
No.
Okay, who?
My daughter.
Okay, where does she stay at?
She lives in Washington, D.C. This is my daughter?
We don't know. Okay. Again, this is a tip that's called into to the U.S. Marshals and PSP hotline. Okay?
I want to know what the story is behind them going to the wrong house.
This week.
Go inside, guys. Go inside.
Well, we will in a second. We have to go to more than just two guys, but that's why we're here is to show force we are.
Who's fixing my door? Because you broke it the way you kicked it.
It's not broken.
No,
Door?
I saw the inside.
It's not
Yes,
broken.
whoever was
They
kicking that
kicked
door,
it down.
when I was coming downstairs peacefully, you had to hear my feet coming. Someone's paying for this, so go ahead, do your thing.
That's fine.
Do your job, because you have me so scared right now and so mad.
I appreciate that.
Do you guys have a warrant, by the way?
Homicide warrant? Homicide warrant? Yes.
No. Do you have a warrant from a house? I'm just asking so I know.
No, you don't have a search warrant for your house.
You do not.
They don't have a warrant.
I'm giving you consent, but I can withdraw it at any time, right?
You don't have a search warrant for your
Because I'm scared right now.
house. We are not
He should not do that. He should not have done that. He should not have done that. He should not have done that. I'm gonna be real. What he probably should have done immediately was say, "You do not have consent to search my house, and am I under arrest? Am I free to leave?" And if they say no, you are under arrest, then immediately lawyer up. Now that he's given them consent to search his house, he's gonna have a lot harder time trying to seek justice against these fucked up cops, because he's now on video giving them consent to search his house. And even if there isn't anything there for them to find, it doesn't matter. They're in the wrong for what they did. Now they've got like evidence that he's made of him giving them permission, which like voids the need for a warrant. Like he had them when they said they didn't have a warrant, I'm pretty sure, right? Like that's not legal. I don't think, well, no, because it's on a tip, right? They claim they had a tip called in, and the cops are allowed to just show up and search a place if it's on a tip. So that's why they don't have a warrant. Okay, never mind. I wonder what their justification is for... I wonder if the tip... I've got so many questions and theories.
Can't think of your house. You don't want
Conduit
to
power.
figure
Huh.
out what
Yep. Kindness build a conduit?
The officers inform Mr. Thornton that although they do not have a search warrant for his home, they can enter because they have his consent, which the officers believe to be valid, despite the fact that Mr. Thornton informed him that he has dementia. In the 1981 case of Stegall versus United States, the Supreme Court determined that the warrantless entry into a home to arrest a non-resident violated the Fourth Amendment, despite the fact that the officers had an arrest warrant, because, quote, absent exigent circumstances or consent, an entry into a private dwelling to conduct a search or effect an arrest is unreasonable without a warrant. Now, while the court noted that the arrest warrant would permit the officers to enter the suspect's own residence, it determined that it did not authorize the officers to enter someone else's home in order to arrest the suspect when the homeowner did not consent.
Because they just thought that this residence and the people living in it had a connection to their suspect, not that this was the suspect's home. So they didn't have... They had no legal authority to conduct this raid at all.
Were not in hot
even with
pursuit
permission
of the suspect, and no other.
So much so that even with permission, even if they found something there, it wouldn't be admissible in court.
Exigent circumstances existed. Therefore, because the officers did not have a warrant to enter Mr. Thornton's residence and no exigent circumstances appeared to exist, the officers could not enter Mr. Thornton's home without his consent. As the Supreme Court explained in the 2006 case of Georgia versus Randolph, one exception to the rule prohibiting the warrantless entry of a person's house, quote, recognizes the validity of searches with the voluntary consent of an individual possessing authority. The Supreme Court held in the 1973 case of Schneckloth versus Bustamante that, quote, it is only by analyzing all the circumstances of an individual consent that it can be ascertained whether in fact it was voluntary or coerced. And that, quote, examining all the surrounding circumstances to determine if in fact the consent to search was coerced, account must be taken of subtly coercive police questions, as well as the possibly vulnerable subjective state of the person who consents. However, it is important to note that when analyzing whether a consent to search was given voluntarily, courts focus primarily on the officer's understanding of the situation, rather than whether or not the individual actually consented. For instance, in the 2005 case of U.S. versus Guerrero,
so it's whether or not the cop...
Circuit...
So they judge it based on whether or not the cop could reasonably assume that they had consent to search the property. Did you imagine any other, like... Could you imagine any other standard for consent being that? Being what the person who did the thing that needs to be consented to thought? Like whether or not they could reasonably assume they had like that's fucking crazy, dude.
Court of Appeals noted that, quote, "The focus is not whether Guerrero subjectively consented, but
That would
rather
work
whether
nowhere
a
else.
reasonable officer would believe consent was given." In the 2020 case of U.S. versus Quesada Laura, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals noted that, quote, "Our cases have never required perfect mental ability to find a consent to search was voluntary, and ultimately determined that a consent to search was valid despite an individual's dementia because, quote, the extent of his impairment at the time of his consent to search was not severe, and the agents involved in obtaining
how do
the
you know
consent
it's
testified
dementia?
that, quote, no aspect of the dysfunction was apparent to them. So based on this precedent, it
Okay.
seems most
So, because the cops could not tell he had dementia, their own words, that means that him having dementia is of no legal bearing to what the cops did, according to the law. That's crazy, dude. That's actually crazy. You have to understand, so much of this stuff that, like, sounds on paper like it's really, like it's good policy meant to keep, like, the police accountable. Generally, actually, if you look at the fine print, the only cases, in which any, like, justice come about are ones in which the cop has to pretty much admit to doing wrongdoing. Because they just really love to take cops on their word when it comes to this stuff. Doesn't mean every bad, like, corrupt cop gets away with breaking the law and using their position to do bad stuff, but more often than not, they get away with it. Usually. This means the police had this exact same scenario before and they wrote the law to dance around it, Xander Hall. Oh yeah, no, this has been a long-term issue. Like, false... Like, the police going to the wrong house to do a, like, out-of-nowhere, no-warrant raid is a long-standing thing. Like, that is not uncommon at all.
probable that a court would determine that the officers reasonably believed Mr. Thornton's consent was voluntary based on his demeanor and apparent understanding of the situation and his rights. However,
he shouldn't
the
have
officers
consented to
were
letting them
on
search.
notice that Mr. Thornton suffered from dementia, and he repeatedly stated that he was scared and confused. So
Wait, so
it
they
is
knew?
also possible that a court could conclude that his consent was not effective.
He was saying he's
Although,
shaking, too,
given the low standard
in the video.
required to prove voluntariness, this outcome seems unlikely.
Ambulances, a SWAT truck, lots of cars, and a rude officer. What's the relationship with my daughter?
I'll explain it. I'm not with this guy.
Yeah, I'd want to know what the
Right,
fuck.
this is
what-
total
what's-
transparency because
what's
I
my
just
daughter
did a commercial
involved in?
walk into my house. I can withdraw it right now. So you tell me now where I withdraw it. I'm going to draw this consent. Sirs, get out of my house. I'm withdrawing consent.
Based.
I am withdrawing consent. Do you now hear it? You're on camera. They're still
They wouldn't
moving
tell him
forward.
why what his daughter had to do with any of this.
They're still going in. I withdrew my consent, and you guys even knew I could do it. They're still searching.
You want
I
us out?
already
Now they're
told them
refusing to
out.
leave.
You can't go back and forth saying you let us in, you don't let us in.
I said, can I withdraw consent? And you said yes on camera.
Yes, you can. Yes.
And
you
I
can.
did. I not just
Okay.
withdraw it.
So here's
He has not gone back and forth.
what's going on.
Right now, they're doing an illegal search in my house.
Hey, Steve. The homeowner's saying we don't have consent now.
So, okay. 100% of the time, when the cops know they are fucked, that they have gotten caught on video, breaking the law and doing something wrong, they always go real quiet and talk to another cop, like, about how, like, listen, we might have fucked up here. We're gonna, like, you'll just hear them mumbling into their walkie-talkie or talking to another cop in, like, another cop car that showed up as backup, to kind of, like, figure out their game plan, their strategy for how they're going to mitigate the damage that this is going to do to them legally. Because they watch each other's backs. They protect their own.
I have Alzheimer's. I have dementia right now, and I'm really scared.
Alzheimer's.
Okay. Well, there's no reason to be scared. We're not here.
I
to-
told him to stop the consent until I got the truth, and you already told them, and they're still searching my house.
Here's the thing.
I have enough security cameras in there. They're on scared. They heard me withdraw consent, and they're still continuing in there after I withdraw it.
Mr. Thornton argues that the officers are searching his home illegally because they continued to search after he withdrew his consent. The Supreme
Can
Court
he
has
withdraw
not
consent?
expressly established that an individual may withdraw consent to search that they have voluntarily given. However,
He should have
in the
never given it in
1980
the
case
first
of
place.
Walter versus United States, the court explained that, quote, when an official search is properly authorized, whether by consent or by the issuance of a valid warrant, the scope of the search is limited by the terms of its authorization. determine. And in the 1991 case of Florida versus Gimeno, it stated that, quote, a suspect may, of course, delimit as he chooses the scope of the search to which he consents. Based in part on this precedent, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Pennsylvania, held in the 2018 case of United States versus Williams that the subject of a consensual search may terminate the search by withdrawing their consent, noting that, quote, our sister circuits that have considered whether individuals may withdraw consent to search have unanimously answered in the affirmative, and citing decisions from the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th circuits recognizing the right to withdraw consent. The Third Circuit also clarified that once an individual
The crazy thing when it comes to laws like this is how much ambiguity there is and how much, like, this has to be argued. Like, this is most of what lawyers probably do. I'm pretty sure I know this is most of what lawyers do, is, like, looking at past related cases, looking to see if the rulings set a precedent that's in their favor, and trying to use a past ruling to justify the favorable ruling for them, which means that, like, so much of law is literally theoretical. Like, legal theory is a phrase for a reason. Like, a lot of it is literally debatable in court, and that's, like, what the lawyer does, essentially. They do other stuff, but it's a pretty big part of what legal representation tends to do. When what it has to do to work with the law.
has voluntarily consented to a search, they can only withdraw their consent through, quote, an act or statement that an objective viewer would understand as an expression of his desire to no longer be searched. Here,
That
Mr.
sounded
Thornton
about right.
unequivocally
Yeah.
revoked his consent by explicitly stating that he was
Repeatedly.
withdrawing his consent multiple times. And
Yeah,
the court would
repeatedly.
almost certainly determine that the officers violated the Fourth Amendment by continuing to search his home after hearing these statements.
Because I want the truth. I got no one on.
I told you the truth. What do you mean? I'm not telling you the truth.
Let me finish, and I apologize. I'm getting frustrated.
Okay.
I'm standing out here in the cold in pajamas. I said, I'm gonna reach in my pocket. I'm gonna grab my phone,
Yes.
and I was told yes. And then I said, I'm gonna start recording. And then I started hearing officers tell me, no, put the phone away. I'm not allowed to record. I have all this going on, and then
You are allowed
they
to-
still
allowed to
continue to
record.
go through there after knowing right now they're doing an illegal search.
Here's the thing. I radioed to them to tell them to stop.
I stood right here. They stared at me when I told them I withdraw consent. So right now, my Fourth Amendment is being violated.
This has, like I told you, this has to do with a wanted person who's wanted for attempted
Right.
homicide. We received a tip through Crime Stoppers regarding this. Okay.
Crime
And
Stalkers?
the tip
Is that like a
said
tip
that
program or
person
something
was at your
for the
residence
police?
from this weekend.
The officers informed Mr. Thornton that they received an anonymous Crime Stoppers tip that the suspect was staying at Mr. Thornton's house, and that the tip was the basis for their search.
Hey, kindness.
In the 1983 case of Illinois
That is
versus Gates,
crazy,
the Supreme Court
dude.
held that when determining
The cops can just say, "No, this search is justified because we got an anonymous tip." Dog, like, you have to understand, no matter how much you might think, oh, there's all these different, like, rules and barriers and boundaries to what the cops can do, there's always some bullshit caveat that lets the cops get away with doing unconstitutional shit. Like, oh yeah, the cops have to be reasonably certain of yada yada yada, but the cops are the ones that get to determine what that reasonable certainty would be. It's like, okay, well then what's the point of even having the regulation? It's just to make the cops look like they're being held accountable when they're not.
whether an anonymous tip gives rise to the probable cause necessary to issue a warrant, courts must apply a totality of the circumstances analysis that considers an informant's so-called veracity, reliability, and basis of knowledge. In reaching this conclusion, the court reasoned that, quote, informants' tips doubtless come in many shapes and sizes from many different types of persons, and, quote, informants' tips, like all other clues and evidence coming to a policeman on the scene, may vary greatly in their value and reliability reliability. Applying this precedent to a Terry stop, the Supreme Court concluded in the 1990 case of Alabama versus White that because, quote, an anonymous tip alone
White.
seldom demonstrates the informant's basis of knowledge or veracity, and given that, quote, the veracity of persons supplying anonymous tips is by hypothesis largely unknown and unknowable,
Like,
an
how do you even
uncorroborated
prove that?
anonymous tip standing alone, quote, would not warrant a man of reasonable caution in the belief that a stop was appropriate. Although the court clarified that, quote, this is not to say that an anonymous caller could never provide the reasonable suspicion necessary for a Terry stop, it also noted that, quote, some tips completely lacking in indicia of reliability would either warrant no police response or require further investigation before a forcible stop of a suspect would be authorized. Based on the information available, it seems highly likely that a court would conclude that the Crime Stopper's tip alone did not give the officers the probable.
I do genuinely think that, and I imagine we'll get the full story at the end of the video, so I'm just going to throw my theory out right now. I feel like a court would, even, like, whether it was determined by the judge or a jury, would probably come down on the side of this guy. The video evidence is pretty clear. They didn't have a reason to be there. They were very, like, weird and obtuse with the guy's questions even after finding out they had no business being there, and he was literally asking, like, what does this have to do with my family, what does this have to do with my daughter and my home, this is relevant to me, I've just, you know, had a SWAT team raid at my house. I think there's a good chance that a jury or a judge would probably side with the family here, honestly.
Cause they needed to obtain a warrant to search Mr. Thornton's home, or even reasonable suspicion for that matter, as the anonymous tipster seemed to simply assert that the suspect was staying there without
Tipster?
any additional information that could be used to assess the credibility of the tip. In fact, in an interview with the Real News Network about the incident, Mr. Thornton reported that the officers had applied for a warrant before coming to his home, and it was denied by the judge for a lack of probable cause.
Right now, there's an illegal search going on in my house. That's what I care about because I wanted them out. I totally respect your position. I totally respect what you're doing. I know you guys are scared. You guys have somebody wanted. But I do not understand the show of force and the aggressiveness towards me because this is my home. I gave you my medical condition, and you guys still are doing this. See, and they're upstairs now. You said they're on their way out.
After completing their search of Mr. Thornton's home and not finding the suspect, the officers eventually left. According to a GoFundMe campaign started by Mr. Thornton's daughter, as a result of the officers' actions,
I want to hear the
Mr.
story
Thornton's
behind the
front door
daughter.
could
What's the
not
daughter
be
involved
securely
with?
shut or locked, and his doorbell camera was broken. The GoFundMe also
Of course his
reports
camera
that
was
the carpet
broken.
in 2 bedrooms.
They like, yeah, we've already seen, they destroyed his property. They kicked down his door, obviously, and they also yeeted that Ring doorbell. And those things aren't, like, insanely expensive, but they're also not cheap. Like, it's not the kind of thing that it's like, dude, my Ring doorbell. What are you gonna do about that? Like, they fucked up the door. It couldn't lock. And, like, I don't know about you guys, but I literally never leave my door unlocked. I could not sleep in a house that doesn't have locking front door. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but, like, holy shit, they literally made his house unsecure and unsafe and destroyed his shit in a raid at the wrong place where the suspect they were looking for wasn't at, where they were repeatedly asked, you know, like given, had consent to search withdrawn. Yeah, pretty crazy.
Was ruined by a dark substance that looked like paint or tar that seemed to have been tracked in on one of the officer's shoes. Following the interaction, Mr. Thornton filed a request for the body camera footage and other material related to the interaction, but his request was denied after a lengthy exchange with the Pennsylvania State Police, who directed Mr. Thornton to file his request with the U.S. Marshal Services, as they were the lead authority on the scene at the time.
They're trying to
As
just
of the
get him to
writing
give
of this
up.
episode, Mr. Thornton has not received any body camera footage related to this incident. Mr. Thornton also suffered a stroke shortly after this encounter, which he believes to be a direct result of this interaction. Overall, the officers get an F for destroying Mr. Thornton's personal property, failing to properly
Yeah, no
account for
shit.
Mr. Thornton's dementia diagnosis, and violating the Fourth Amendment by continuing to search Mr. Thornton's home after he withdrew the consent that was the sole basis of their authority to enter his home. When reviewing this encounter, it is important to keep in mind that because the officers had been denied a warrant, they were engaged in what should have been a so-called consensual encounter with Mr. Thornton. And while the Supreme Court has held that officers may approach the door of a home and
wording.
knock, just as any private citizen might do, the scope of this invitation clearly does not include destroying the homeowner's doorbell camera to avoid being filmed or breaking in their door if they do not respond quickly enough. Additionally, although I
Yeah,
cannot
they
say
didn't
for
have the right
certain
to
whether the
enter without
officers
his
were
permission at all.
knowingly attempting to take advantage of Mr. Thornton's mental state, at best, they ignored it, along with his repeated assertions that he was confused and afraid, and continued in their relentless pursuit of a suspect who was not inside Mr. Thornton's home or even known to him. Now, while I understand that the officers were hoping to find a dangerous criminal, their uncompromising focus on capturing the fugitive caused them to terrify a citizen with dementia and infringe upon his constitutional rights, which is particularly egregious given the fact that Mr. Thornton did not even know the man they were looking for and was certainly not harboring him in his home. This interaction demonstrates how officers can trample on the rights of innocent citizens when they are more concerned with
How can
results
he
rather
even
than
answer their
abiding by the
questions and say
limitations the Constitution
whether or not the
places
suspect
on
was
their
there if he
authority.
doesn't know who the
As
suspect
for
is and
Mr.
what their
Thornton,
relation
I
is to
cannot
his family?
rightfully assign a grade to a man with dementia who was simply the victim of police overreach. While the courts may not recognize that Mr. Thornton's dementia rendered his consent involuntary, I am certain that his condition made this interaction incredibly challenging to navigate, and, as he repeatedly informed the officers, confusing and frightening. That being said, there were many things that Mr. Thornton did right in this encounter, despite his diagnosis, and I want to commend him for his attempts to defend his Fourth Amendment rights, however fruitless they ultimately proved, as well as his choice to film the interaction and share it with the public on YouTube. I would also like to take this opportunity to
Always
encourage
film the
him
cops.
to continue
Post
to
that shit on Twitter and
advocate for his
YouTube.
constitutional rights by filing complaints and pursuing a lawsuit against the officers and agencies involved in this encounter.
Based.
Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic that you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more police interaction
Oh,
content.
damn. A second channel. Hot damn. Yes, this channel's called Audit the Audit, and it's really good. I like this channel a lot. Yeah, this channel's awesome. I like this channel a lot. I think the content's good. I think it's some of the best, like, true crime-ish content. It's not true crime content. I feel like there's not even, like, a genre name for this type of content, really. I guess it would just be body cam or police activity, like, content would be the name of this, like, genre of content. I don't know. I've just gotten really into it. I think that it's nice to have some channels covering this stuff that aren't just, like, propaganda. I don't know if you guys know this, but the vast majority of channels that make content like this are pretty propaganda-y. Like, most of them are just like, cop epically owns sovereign citizen cringe lord lefty slams their face into a car hood for not for resisting arrest. It's just like a basic traffic stop and the person's like kind of annoying, but like everybody online's like, I wish that cop would have shot that sovereign citizen piece of shit. Because like sovereign citizens are pretty annoying and cringe, but the internet like actually wants to see cops kill them. There's a certain level of like internet brain that people get to where they start believing that cringiness means that you deserve death. I really don't know how else to put it, but it's like an actual phenomenon I've seen online where like the more internet brain people get, the more they believe that being cringe is like a genuine moral shortcoming. And I've seen people unironically wish for the death of people for no other reason than that person is cringe. Unbased and very cringe, but should be given help instead of brutality. Like, I think what the fundamental problem is, a lot of this, like, propaganda content is that it's, like, really entertaining, and a lot of the time the person who's getting arrested or the cops are dealing with is pretty awful and probably does deserve to be arrested. And that's even a lot of this channel's content, too. But that is, like, nowhere near the majority of interactions the average American citizen has with cops. The amount of people that just, like, weren't doing anything wrong that end up having their day ruined by a cop, it's overwhelmingly common.